Before we get to the story, I'd like to say thanks so much for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading cosmic horror related stories every single day. So if that sounds good, please drop a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot, especially when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. I work the night shift at a radio telescope facility outside Copper Valley, New Mexico. It's mostly boring work, monitoring equipment, running diagnostics, making sure nothing breaks while the real scientists are asleep. I've been doing it for 3 years now, and I can't remember the last time anything interesting happened. The facility sits about 15 miles from town, surrounded by desert and scrub brush. Just me, the telescope, and the biggest sky you've ever seen. Most nights, I spend my time reading or watching videos on my phone between equipment checks. The scientists come in during the day to analyze whatever information the telescope collected overnight. My job is just to make sure it keeps collecting. It's lonely work, but I like it. Always have. There's something peaceful about being the only person awake for miles, watching the stars turn overhead. That changed 2 months ago. It started small. I was doing my usual rounds, checking the telescope alignment, when I noticed something odd about the northern sky. A few stars seemed off. Not missing, just wrong. Like someone had moved them slightly to the left while I wasn't looking. I checked the calibration logs. Everything looked fine. The equipment was running normally, tracking correctly, recording properly. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The stars were still wrong. I pulled up the star charts on the computer, comparing what I was seeing to what should be there. The positions didn't match. 3 stars in particular, bright ones I'd looked at hundreds of times, were all shifted about 2 degrees east of where they should be. I told myself it was nothing. Equipment glitches happen. My eyes were probably just tired. I'd been pulling doubles all week because Tom had called in sick with the flu. But the feeling stayed with me for the rest of the shift. This nagging sense that something wasn't right. I drove home as the sun came up, too wired to sleep. Elena was already awake, getting ready for her shift at the hospital. She's a nurse, works the day shift at Copper Valley General. We're like ships passing in the night most weeks, but we make it work. Rough night? She asked, pouring me coffee. Weird night, I said. Probably nothing. The next night, more stars had shifted, and there was something else. A dark patch in the sky where nothing should be empty. Not black like normal space, but darker, like an absence of everything. Looking at it made my stomach turn. I spent an hour just staring at it through the telescope. The darkness didn't resolve into anything. It was just nothing. A void where stars should be, and it was growing. I could see the edges expanding slowly, swallowing more stars. I mentioned it to Logan the next morning. He's my supervisor, been working at the facility for 15 years. He barely looked up from his coffee. Calibration's probably off, he said. I'll have someone look at it. It's not the equipment, I said. I checked everything twice. The stars are moving, and there's this dark spot. Logan just shrugged. Ben, you've been working too many doubles. Get some rest. You're probably seeing things. I'm not seeing things. Then it's atmospheric interference, weather pattern, something mundane. He looked at me over his coffee mug. Don't go making a big deal out of nothing. We don't need corporate breathing down our necks over false alarms. I went home and tried to sleep. but I kept seeing that dark patch. In my dreams, I was falling into it, falling forever into nothing. I'd wake up gasping, my heart pounding, sheets soaked with sweat. Elena asked if I was okay. I didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain that something in the sky is wrong, that darkness is spreading where it shouldn't? When I came back that night, the void had grown. It was definitely bigger now, maybe twice the size it had been. I called the main observatory in Socorro to ask if they were seeing anything unusual. The astronomer I talked to sounded confused. "Everything looks normal here," he said. "What exactly are you seeing?" I tried to describe it, the displaced stars, the growing darkness. He was quiet for a long moment. "Could be a sensor malfunction on your end, or maybe dust on the lens. These things happen. I wouldn't worry about it." But he was looking at the same sky. How could he not see it? I started checking every night, documenting the growth in my head, even though I knew I shouldn't obsess over it. But I couldn't help it. The void kept expanding, this growing darkness that made my skin crawl whenever I looked at it. Each night, it was bigger. Each night, it swallowed more stars. By the end of the first week, I could see it with my naked eye, just a dark spot in the northern sky. But it was there. I pointed it out to Tom when he came back to work. "I don't see anything," he said, squinting up at the sky. "Right there, that dark circle." Tom shook his head. "Man, you need to take a vacation. You're starting to freak me out." But I knew what I was seeing. I knew it was real. My girlfriend Elena noticed I wasn't sleeping well. We'd been together for 2 years, living together for 6 months, and she could always tell when something was bothering me. "You're working too much," she said one morning, finding me staring out the bedroom window at the pre-dawn sky. The void was still visible even as the sun came up, like a bruise on the sky. "You need to take a break." "There's something wrong with the sky," I said. She looked where I was pointing. "I don't see anything." "That dark spot, right there." Elena squinted. "Ben, that's just empty space. There aren't stars everywhere." But she was wrong. There should have been stars there. I'd been looking at that section of sky for 3 years. I knew every constellation, every bright star. I knew what was supposed to be there. "Maybe I am working too much," I said, because I didn't want to worry her. But I didn't believe it. 2 weeks in, the void was unmistakable, about the size of the moon. This dark circle in the northern sky that wasn't quite black, more like nothing, a hole in reality. Even Eleanor could see it now, though she didn't seem as bothered by it as I was. "Huh," she said one night. "That is weird. Maybe it's some kind of eclipse." "Eclipse of what? There's nothing to block." "I don't know. I'm sure the news would say something if it was important." But the news wasn't saying anything. I checked every day. Nothing about the void. Nothing about displaced stars. It was like I was the only person who cared. And that's when other things started happening. I first noticed it at home. Elena and I have a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it's ours. One morning, I walked from the bedroom to the kitchen, and it felt like it took too long, like the hallway had stretched while I wasn't paying attention. I counted my steps on the way back. 14 steps, same as always. But it felt wrong, like the space between the rooms had grown somehow. I measured it later with a tape measure. 32 feet, the same as always. But it felt wrong. Elena mentioned something strange too. She'd watered the houseplants by the living room window, but the next day they were in the corner by the TV. She thought I'd moved them. I hadn't. Maybe I'm losing it, she joked, but she looked uneasy. Things kept appearing in wrong places. Keys we left on the kitchen counter ended up on the bathroom sink. Books migrated from shelves to tables. Small displacements, but constant. Like everything in the apartment was slowly shifting position when we weren't looking. At work, Tom came back from sick leave. He seemed off, quieter than usual, with this distant look in his eyes. He kept staring at walls, turning corners carefully, like he wasn't sure what would be on the other side. I found him standing in the break room one night, staring at the wall next to the coffee maker. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't turn around. "That hallway used to be here." "What hallway?" "To the bathroom. It was right here yesterday. Now it's somewhere else." I checked. He was right. The bathroom was now on the opposite side of the building, down a different hallway. But that was impossible. Buildings don't just rearrange themselves. And I had worked here for 3 years. I knew the layout. "Tom, the bathroom's always been over there." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were wrong, too wide, too empty. "I feel compressed," he said, "like I'm being squeezed into a smaller space, like I'm not fitting in my own body anymore. Maybe you should go home. You still look sick." He walked away before I could say anything else, heading toward the supply closet. I watched him open the door and step inside. Then I went back to my station, telling myself he just needed space. 20 minutes later, I realized Tom hadn't come back. I went to check on him. The supply closet door was still closed. I opened it, empty, but not normal empty. The closet seemed to extend back much farther than it should. I could see shelves and equipment disappearing into darkness, going back and back and back like a tunnel. The closet was maybe 6 feet deep normally. Now it looked like it went on forever. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking. That night, I couldn't focus on work. I kept thinking about what Tom had said, about feeling compressed, about space moving. I looked up at the void again. It had grown to twice the size of the moon now, dominating the northern sky. And that's when I understood. The stars weren't moving away from us. Space itself was being pushed aside, displaced. Everything was being shoved out of the way to make room for something. The void wasn't empty. Something was coming through, something so massive it had to push reality aside just to fit. Objects were shifting position because they were being displaced around this incoming presence. Rooms were growing larger because space itself was stretching, making room. Tom felt compressed because he was being compressed, pushed aside in his own body to accommodate something else. I tried to explain this to Logan the next morning, but he just stared at me. His eyes had that same empty look Tom's had, vacant, like he was looking through me instead of at me. "Logan," I said, "did you hear what I said?" He didn't respond, just turned and walked toward the supply closet, opened the door, stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I stood there for a full minute, staring at that door. Then I ran. I didn't open it to check on him. I just ran. I left work early and drove straight home. The drive felt wrong. Streets were in different places. The route I'd taken for 3 years suddenly had extra turns, extra blocks. It should have taken 10 minutes. It took 30. Elena was standing in the driveway when I pulled up, looking at our apartment building. "Ben," she said when I got out of the car. Her face was pale. "Something's wrong with our place." "What do you mean?" "I can't find the bathroom. I've been walking around for 20 minutes. The rooms keep changing. I'll walk through a door and end up somewhere different than I expected." I looked at the building. From the outside, it looked normal. 2 stories, beige stucco, small balconies. But Elena was right. I could feel it. Something was wrong. We went inside together, and I saw what she meant. The living room was 3 times larger than it should have been. Our couch sat in the middle of this huge, empty space, looking tiny and lost. The walls were the same color, the ceiling the same height, but the space between them had grown. Elena grabbed my arm. "I'm scared." "We need to leave," I said. "We need to get out of Copper Valley." We threw some clothes in a bag and got in the car. The drive to Socorro should take 30 minutes on the highway. Straight shot, mostly empty road through the desert. We drove for 4 hours. The roads curved wrong, bent in directions they shouldn't. Highway signs appeared and disappeared. We passed the same gas station 5 times, even though we never turned around. The mountains on the horizon seemed to shift and slide, making room for something we couldn't see. Elena was crying, her hands gripping the dashboard. "What's happening? Why can't we leave?" "I don't know." But I did know. We were being displaced, pushed aside. The roads, the town, the whole world. All of it shifting around something that needed the space more than we did. We ended up back at our apartment. I don't know how. We just turned a corner and there it was, even though we'd been driving away from it for hours. The building was massive now, at least twice the size it had been when we left, maybe 3 times. Our second-floor apartment looked tiny, lost in this huge structure that somehow had our same front door, our same balcony, just stretched and displaced. Elena started crying harder. "I can feel it, Ben. Something's pushing me aside, like I'm being compressed inside my own body, like I'm not fitting right anymore." I felt it too. This sensation of being squeezed, pushed into a corner of myself, like my consciousness was being relocated to make room for something else. Making room. The void covered a quarter of the sky now. Even in daylight, you could see it. This vast darkness spreading across the heavens. And if you looked closely, really looked, you could see something moving in it. Not darkness, something else. Something the human mind couldn't process. So it showed up as nothing instead. We locked ourselves in what we thought was our bedroom, but the walls kept moving, receding. Every time I looked away and looked back, the room was bigger. We huddled together in the middle of it, watching the space expand around us, our bed getting smaller and smaller in comparison. Elena kept forgetting things, small stuff at first. What she'd had for breakfast, her mother's middle name, then bigger things, where she grew up, how we met. She'd start to tell me something and trail off, confused, like the memory had been pushed somewhere she couldn't reach it anymore. "It's making room," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It's pushing my memories aside, compressing them, to fit something else in. I can feel it happening. I can feel myself getting smaller. I held her tight, but I could feel it too. Parts of my mind being gently pushed aside, memories compressing, thoughts relocating to smaller and smaller spaces, making room for something else. I looked out the window. Our neighbors were standing in their yards, all of them. Old Mrs. Chen from next door, the college kids who lived below us, the family with 3 kids across the street, all of them just standing there, perfectly still, not moving, not blinking, like empty shells. Something had pushed them aside in their own bodies, displaced their consciousness to make room for something else. They were still in there somewhere. I could sense it, this faint awareness trapped in corners of their own minds. But something else inhabited most of them now. The void in the sky was changing, not darkness anymore. I could see texture now, depth, layers of something incomprehensibly vast pressing through reality, forcing everything to move aside and accommodate it. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't even aware of us. We were too small, too insignificant. It simply needed the space we happened to occupy. Like water displacing air, like a hand pushing into sand, natural, inevitable, not cruel, just existing. Elena went quiet. I turned to look at her. She was staring at me, but her eyes were different, empty. She was still in there somewhere. I could sense her consciousness, compressed into some tiny corner of her own mind, still aware, still feeling. But something else inhabited most of her now. It didn't speak, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there, experiencing existence through her body, learning what it meant to inhabit physical space. I felt it starting in me too, my thoughts being gently pushed aside, compressed. I tried to fight it, tried to hold on to myself, but how do you fight something that isn't attacking? It wasn't invading, it wasn't hostile, just existing in space I happened to occupy. My memories started squeezing together, making room. I could feel parts of myself being relocated to some cramped corner of my own consciousness, not destroyed, just moved aside, compressed, like files on a computer being zipped to save space. The universe wasn't expanding naturally anymore. It was being forced to expand, stretched and displaced to accommodate this presence. Every person, every planet, every star, all of it being pushed aside, compressed, to make room for something larger. I stumbled to the window. The void had grown massive, covering half the sky. I could see it clearly now. Not a void at all. Something beautiful and terrible. Something that existed on a scale humans couldn't comprehend. Dimensions we didn't have words for. Existence beyond our understanding. It wasn't evil. It wasn't even aware of humanity as individuals. We were like ants to it. No, smaller than ants. We were bacteria, molecules, too insignificant to notice as it settled itself into existence. Most of me was gone now, pushed aside. I could still see and hear, but I couldn't control anything. My consciousness had been compressed into a tiny corner of my own mind, and something else was operating my body. My hand reached for the door handle without my input, opened it. My legs carried me outside, down the stairs, into the street, each movement smooth and purposeful, but not mine. I joined the neighbors, all of us standing there, motionless, still conscious, still aware, but pushed aside in our own bodies, relegated to tiny compressed corners of our own existence, while something else inhabited the space. I could see everything more clearly from this compressed perspective, like being pressed against a window, looking out at the world I used to inhabit. The thing in the sky wasn't coming through. It was already here, had been pressing through for weeks, pushing reality aside bit by bit. Reality had been stretching and bending and making room, and now there was finally enough space for it to settle in comfortably. It was beautiful, vast and incomprehensible and beautiful. Not because it was good, but because it was so much larger than everything I'd ever known. Looking at it from my tiny, compressed corner of consciousness, I finally understood the true scale of the universe and how small we were in it, how insignificant. The void covered the entire sky now. Stars had been pushed to the edges, compressed together to make room. Planets displaced, galaxies relocated, all of reality shifting aside to accommodate something that needed this space more than we did. I tried to scream, but I had no control over my mouth, no control over my breathing, no control over anything. I was still here, still aware, but I was just a passenger now, a compressed fragment of consciousness tucked away in some corner of my own existence, watching through eyes I no longer controlled. Elena was still in there too. I could sense her, and Tom, and Logan, and Mrs. Chen, and everyone in Copper Valley, everyone on Earth. All of us pushed aside, but still conscious, still aware, trapped forever in corners of ourselves, while something else lived in the space where we used to be. We weren't being destroyed. That would have been kinder. We were being relocated, compressed, made smaller to accommodate something larger, like squeezing extra files onto a hard drive. We were still there, just taking up less space. The universe wasn't expanding, it was making room. And we were just part of what got pushed aside. I'm still here, in this tiny, compressed corner of my consciousness, still aware, still watching through eyes I can't control as my body stands motionless in the street. I'll be here forever, I think, aware but powerless, a guest in my own existence. The thing in the sky has settled now, comfortable, at home in the space it carved out by pushing everything else aside. I can see it clearly, this vast presence that needed room and simply took it. Not maliciously, not consciously, just existing. And all around it, compressed into the margins of reality, humanity watches from corners of their own minds, still here, still conscious, but displaced, pushed aside, made small, making room for something that needed this space more than we ever did. The void is complete now. The displacement is finished. Reality has bent itself around this new presence, and there's no going back. We're all still here, tucked away in the corners, watching, waiting, feeling everything but controlling nothing, forever making room.